This is a Cambridge IGCSE Biology Paper 2 multiple choice extended past paper talk through from June 21. So, question 1. What is a characteristic of all living organisms? Use Mrs. H. Gren to help you here. Remember, it's a mnemonic that will help you remember. That's movement, respiration, sensitivity, homeostasis, growth, reproduction, excretion, and nutrition. So, have I mentioned any of these words just then? Yes, I mentioned sensitivity, which is why that is the answer. The table shows a section of DNA taken from 4 different organisms. Which 2 organisms are the most distantly related to each other? The key word there is distantly. So, we are looking at the base sequence. As you can see down here, Y and Z, they are unbelievably similar. Look at their base sequences aligning. In fact, they're the same. Then we get up to X. Now, X is fairly similar until you get down to this end where it veers off. So we know that X is more distantly related than Y and Z are to each other. And then if you take W, look, that's really extremely different. So the answer here is actually W and X. Scientists discover a new species of animal. It has a segmented body with 2 pairs of legs on each segment. So lots and lots of legs. To which group of animals does this new species belong? So arachnids are things like spiders, crustaceans like lobsters, insects. Gosh, there's so many to pick from with that. The myriapods are the ones which contain the centipedes and millipedes, which have tons and tons of legs. So it's actually D, myriapods. The diagram shows a single-cell organism called euglena, which label structures would also be found in an animal cell. Okay, so let's go through these. No, it's not A because you wouldn't get a chloroplast in an animal cell. Same for B. C is looking good. And D, you wouldn't get a vacuole in an animal cell, so that's why C is the answer. 5. The diagram shows some of the blood vessels and other structures in the human body. The blood vessels shown are all parts of the same. So we're linking the kidneys down here to the heart. We're going down to the arms, down to the legs. Hopefully you can see we've got multiple organs involved in helping this human body work, which is why the answer here is actually organ system. A photograph shows a plant cell nucleus measuring 2 millimeters across. If the magnification of the cell is times 500, what is the actual size of the nucleus? We're going to use this formula triangle, I am, to help us here. We're being asked for the actual size. So if you cover what you're after, you can see it's therefore image size divided by magnification. So the image size we've been told is 2 millimeters. We don't need to touch the units because look, our final answer is in millimeters 2. Then divide by the magnification. So 2 divided by 500 comes out at 0.004, which is B. By which process do oxygen and carbon dioxide move between cells and capillaries? That's a simple one, it's diffusion. They move from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration without the requirement of energy. Which process is involved in the uptake of glucose by the epithelial cells of the kidney tubules? Use the word uptake to help you here. It's moving from an area of low concentration to an area of high concentration, which means it's active transport, otherwise known as active uptake. Osmosis is to do with the movement of water molecules. Translocation is to do with the movement of sugars in plants. Transpiration is to do with the movement of water out of leaves via the stomata, so that's why those aren't the right answer. 9. Which element is found in proteins but not carbohydrates? So they both contain carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, but proteins have the addition of nitrogen and potentially sulfur. So that's why it's not carbon, hydrogen, or oxygen. The answer is C, nitrogen. The diagram shows a short section of a single strand of DNA. Which strand of DNA will combine with this strand to form part of a double helix? So we need to keep the DNA bases here, A, T, C, G. And then just work out the base pairing rules. Remember, it's A goes with T, C goes with G. So we need an answer which is TGGA. That's why D is the answer. Starch is digested by amylase in the mouth but not digested in the stomach. What is the reason for this? A, all starch digestion is complete in the mouth. That's not true. It also takes place in the small intestine. The pH in the stomach is not suitable for amylase to work. That is correct because the pH in the stomach is around 2, whereas amylase needs a much more neutral pH. So the answer here is B. Remember, if you have time to work through why options C and D aren't correct. Which statement describes a catalyst? Remember, catalyst speeds up the rate of reaction without being used up. It is not chemically changed. So just make sure you read these. Look, they both say decreases, so that's not correct. C, a substance that increases the rate of a chemical reaction and is changed. No, it needs to be not changed by it. Read these questions very carefully. 13. A plant with striped leaves was kept in bright light for 6 hours. A leaf was taken from the plant and the chlorophyll was removed. The leaf was then tested for starch using iodine solution, which diagram shows the result of the test. So iodine is used to test for starch. If starch is present, it goes blue-black. If there's no starch, iodine goes yellow-brown or stays yellow-brown. So these are the sort of colours we're looking for. So that's why I'm going to get rid of B and C immediately because we've got the wrong colour combos. Then think about what's happening. The green stripe means that there's chlorophyll, so photosynthesis is taking place, which means glucose and therefore starch can be made. So you'd expect the green stripe to go blue-black. The white stripe here has no chlorophyll, so therefore no photosynthesis. So you'd expect that to just stay yellow-brown due to the absence of starch. Have a look, it's A. The graph shows daily carbon dioxide uptake and transpiration by the plant Agave americana. The plant is adapted to live in very dry conditions. What can be concluded from the graph? Okay, this is quite hard. Transpiration is all to do with water loss. So remember, a plant in very dry conditions will not want to be losing much water. However, it also needs to keep the stomata open at some point to allow carbon dioxide into the leaf for photosynthesis. If you look down here, the time of day, it's around midday here, maximum amount of light. You can actually see that the transpiration is pretty much at its lowest rate in the midday. That means you've got less water loss there, which ties in with it being a plant adapted for very dry conditions. And so we can therefore imagine, that lots of the stomata are closed. So if you actually look down here, it's this one. More stomata are closed during light periods. Statements 1 to 4 describe stages in the development of cholera. Chloride ions are secreted into the guts. Osmosis causes water to move into the gut. The infected person becomes dehydrated. Toxins are produced by the pathogenic bacteria. What is the correct sequence of the 4 stages? Hopefully you can see that the person becoming dehydrated will be the final stage. It will be what the bacteria has actually caused. How does the bacteria do all of this horribleness? By first of all secreting toxins. And then those toxins produced by the pathogenic bacteria will cause chloride ions to be secreted into the gut. And it's the existence of those chloride ions which causes the movement of water. Hence why there's mass loss of water. So if we actually have a look, the order goes 4, 1, 2, 3. C. What are the products when proteins are broken down? Well, proteins are broken down by protease into amino acids. The diagram shows part of a cross-section of a root. What are cells 1, 2 and 3? Look at this characteristic shape. It's a root hair cell. Then part 2, you've got the root cortex cell. And then lastly, remember that water is going to move into the xylem and be transported up the stem. So this is the xylem. So the answer here is B. 18. The diagram shows an onion plant that has been grown from a seed. Each onion plant takes 2 years to flower and produce more seeds. What is the onion bulb acting as in stage 3 and stage 6? Look at what's going on. You can see that in stage 3, this is when the onion bulb is using up the sugar, it needs it, which is why it's a sink. Whereas at stage 6, the onion plant's really relying on that bulb to act as a source of sugar. So we're looking for sink followed by source. So that's B. What are the main vessels carrying blood to and from the kidney? If it's to do with the kidney, it's renal. And remember, it's always going to be an artery carrying blood, oxygenated blood to an organ, unless it's the pulmonary artery. That's the only exception here. So that carries oxygen to the kidney, whereas the renal vein takes the oxygenated blood away from the kidney. So match these up. You can see that the answer is C. The photomicrograph shows human blood. Which blood component makes antibodies? This is plasma. You've got a very low nucleus over here, which is why it's the phagocyte, which is responsible for ingesting pathogens. D is a red blood cell. It transports oxygen attached to hemoglobin. C is your lymphocyte. It's a type of white blood cell which makes antibodies. Has a single large nucleus. So that's why it's identifiable, and that's the answer. A child is vaccinated against measles. After a period of time, the child is infected with the measles virus. The graph shows the concentrations of measles antibodies in the child's bloodstream during this time. So we can see with the vaccination, you've got memory cells being produced here, which means that by the time the child gets infected, the memory cells are producing a huge number of antibodies much sooner and in much larger quantity. So this vaccine is behaving exactly as we want it to. So if you look at the options of which statement is consistent with the information on the graph, it's actually A. After the vaccination, here the child produced memory cells. The child definitely doesn't have passive immunity against measles. The measles virus contains antibodies. No, that's not going to be true. That makes no sense whatsoever. It's the white blood cells that make antibodies. The vaccination failed to protect the child against measles. Not true. Look at this. This is brilliant. How many antibodies are in the blood? Which sequence of changes takes place when we breathe in? So it's worth remembering that upon a breath in, our diaphragm contracts. What does that do? Well, because it flattens, it means that the volume inside the thorax increases. And then because you've got a greater volume with the same quantity of air, it means that the pressure actually decreases. Answer A. The list shows some processes that take place in a human body. Which processes use energy released by respiration? Production of red blood cells, yes, that requires energy. Transmission of nerve impulses from the eyes to the brain, yes, another process which requires energy. Diffusions of gases into and out of the lungs, no, diffusion will always be a passive process. There is no requirement of energy, so that is not true. So our answer here is A, 1 and 2 only. Which equation is aerobic respiration? That means it requires oxygen. Then we have glucose, and we make carbon dioxide and water. So looking down here, it's not A because carbon dioxide does not go in. It's not B for the same reason. C, there's our glucose, there's our oxygen, our carbon dioxide and water, yes. And then this one down here is all to do with anaerobic respiration. And we've been asked about aerobic respiration. 25. Which statement about urea is correct? So urea is formed from excess amino acids. Remember, it's all to do with breaking down protein. So we need to discount anything that mentions glucose. So we're now down to A and D. But where does that deamination take place? It actually takes place in the liver. So that is why it's not correct to pick A. And then lastly, we lose that urea in the kidneys in our urine. Urine, urea. It's all related. And that takes place in the kidneys, a main organ of excretion. So 25D is the answer. 26. The diagram shows the appearance of an eye when in bright light. Which row gives the correct states of the iris muscles in bright light. So our pupil has constricted to stop damage to the retina, but what changes take place to enable that pupil constriction? It's actually going to be C. You do need to just learn this. The radial muscles need to relax and the circular muscles must contract. What is the effect of adrenaline on pulse rate and blood glucose concentration? So remember, adrenaline prepares you for fight or flight. This means your heart rate needs to increase, which is linked with your pulse rate. And it also means that we need more glucose in our blood to enable our muscles to respire, to contract, so that they can allow us to run away or fight. 27D. Which statements about auxin are correct? Now, auxins are effectively plant hormones. They enable the plant roots or stem to respond to tropisms such as light, gravity, or water. So auxin is made in all cells in plants. That's simply not true. It's only some. Auxin causes cells to elongate. That's definitely true inside the stem. Auxin moves between the cells by osmosis. No, because osmosis is all to do with water. Auxin is obviously not water. Auxin is unequally distributed. Yeah, that's how it actually works. So in the stem, for example, it diffuses to the side furthest from the light. So we've ticked 2 and 4. D is the correct answer here. Scientists carried out a survey on the effect of giving up smoking on the risk of developing lung cancer. The results are shown in the graph. The percentage cumulative risk of developing lung cancer is on the left-hand side. So obviously you're doing well if you've never smoked, and if you continue to smoke, quite a high chance of getting lung cancer. The scientists made 3 conclusions. Stopping smoking reduces the risk of developing lung cancer. Yeah, that's definitely true. Age increases the risk of lung cancers for smokers and non-smokers. You can see that there is a positive correlation. Even if you're just looking down here, for the people that never smoked, there's still a positive correlation there. The earlier the people stop smoking, the lower the risk. That's definitely true. Look at these people up here versus the people that stopped earlier on in life. What conclusions are correct? It's all 3. A. A zygote has 10 chromosomes in its nucleus, which row shows the number of chromosomes in the cells of this species. So a zygote is formed from an egg and sperm joining at fertilization. So in effect, it becomes a normal body cell. And so if we consider the body cell, it should therefore have 10 chromosomes in its nucleus. The sperm cells, having the haploid number, will have half of that. And then the embryo cells, again, they effectively count as normal body cells, so we're back up to 10 chromosomes, which is why C is the answer. How will the composition of pregnant woman's blood change as it passes through the placenta? So the whole point of the placenta is to supply oxygen to the growing embryo and fetus. So we expect the concentration of dissolved oxygen to decrease. However, the growing embryo and fetus is actually producing urea as a byproduct, so that's going to be increasing the quantity of that passing the placenta. What carries a copy of the gene to the cytoplasm to make a protein? So remember, in the nucleus, this is all to do with protein synthesis. The DNA unwinds to form mRNA, which is a single-stranded molecule that leaves the nucleus and goes to the cytoplasm to bind with a ribosome. And it's called mRNA because it carries the message, that copy of the gene. Which statement about meiosis is correct? So remember, meiosis makes 4 genetically different daughter cells, which is why we can't be picking the option that says identical. Because you have 4 daughter cells, it means that you go from having diploid cells to haploid, because they contain half the number of chromosomes, so that's not correct because it's going the wrong way. It is used to produce body cells, that's wrong. It's used to produce gametes, which are sex cells, sperm and eggs. It allows the formation of new combinations of chromosomes. For sure, the whole point of meiosis is to introduce genetic variation. Colourblindness is a characteristic that is sex-linked. Remember, colourblindness is carried on the X chromosome. And that actually explains why males are more likely to suffer from colourblindness, because they have the XY combination of chromosomes. So it means that if that chromosome, the X chromosome, carries the gene for colourblindness, they're going to get it because the Y can't help them out. So which statement about colourblindness is correct? We're actually looking for what I was just talking about. Is carried on the X chromosome and it's more common in males. 35. The graph shows the percentage of different blood groups in a human population. What type of variation is shown by human blood groups? The key thing here is it's got absolutely no environmental cause. You inherit your blood group. And you can only be one blood group or another. There's no option for it being a kind of merging of traits. So therefore we're looking for something which is discontinuous and it's caused by genes only. 35D. New strains of the crop plant wheat can be produced by crossbreeding disease-resistant plants with those that give high yields. So this is all to do with humans picking animals and species and plants with desired characteristics and making them breed over several generations. So what is this an example of? Because we are picking it ourselves, it is artificial. It's not anything to do with evolution. Genetic engineering, remember, is all to do with using bacteria to make huge quantities of things like insulin. So it's not that. Asexual reproduction is just about there being no sex involved in producing the new organism, so it's definitely not that. It's B, humans, so it's artificial, selection, picking. 37. The diagram shows the flow of energy. Which form of energy is transferred at points 1 and 3 in the diagram? So remember, the sun gives off light energy to the grass so it can photosynthesize. And then as that energy moves through the grass and the rabbit, it's locked up as chemical energy, which the fox then consumes. C. 38. The diagram shows the feeding relationships in a food web. Which organism may feed as both a secondary and tertiary consumer? So remember, it goes producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer, tertiary consumer. So we need an organism that occupies both the third and fourth position in this food web. So I'm going to show you why it's the fox, because if you start with the wheat, there's the first position, second position, third position, so we're good. And then if you start with the grass, first position, second position, third position, fourth position. So the fox is occupying 2 trophic levels. Why are bacteria useful in genetic engineering? Because if you remember, genetic engineering is all about taking your bacterial cell, and it has these small circles of DNA called plasmids, which can be cut open using restriction enzymes and have new genes inserted into them, which is a super useful way of genetically engineering products such as insulin. So it's irrelevant that they have cell walls, they reproduce sexually, that's not true. Their genetic code is different to other organisms. No, you are trying to get something that has this capability of inserting new genes into it. Which hormones can cause the feminization of male fish? You need some female hormones in here. So that is why it's estrogen and progesterone, because remember, in the menstrual cycle, estrogen and progesterone are all to do with thickening the uterus lining. Obviously, I'm not really talking about that here, we're talking about fish, but you are really looking for some very female-oriented hormones here.